The evidence locker in the basement of the Madison Police Department smells like old paper and forgotten time. Cool air. Fluorescents that hum cardboard stacked to the ceiling like a city without windows. Row after row of boxes. Each one a story interrupted, a question left hanging in the air. In March 2024, cold case detective Lisa Morrison slid a metal ladder along the rails, climbed 3 rungs, and stopped at a shelf no one had touched in years. She checked the log. She traced a finger over the dust. Box number 99-0428. The tape had yellowed into amber. The handwriting on the white label had thinned to a pale blue ghost, still legible. After a quarter-century, Jennifer Martinez. DOB 31583. Disappeared October 23, 1999. Active. Active. A word that meant not solved and not forgotten, both at once. Morrison carried the box to a steel table. She cut the tape carefully so the edges would still meet if she ever had to close it again. She lifted the lid the way you lift a lid on memory, slowly, with respect for what might come out. Inside were the fragments of a 16-year-old's life, a silver necklace sealed in plastic, a lipstick with the color name rubbed off, Nike sneakers, size 7, tagged, photographed, and dormant, and a Highland High School yearbook. The spine cracked softly when she opened it. The pages fluttered with that dry, papery sound you only hear from books that carry the weight of names, seniors with gelled hair and nervous smiles, club photos with awkward shoulders pressed together, homecoming snapshots caught by disposable cameras and frozen under fluorescent light. On page 47, Morrison paused. Between 47 and 48, tucked like a secret, lay a white envelope inside its own evidence bag. A thin dusting of fingerprint powder still clung to the plastic where a technician had tried to raise a print in 1999. The case file said it had been inconclusive. Her eyes moved to the handwriting on the front. Blue ballpoint ink, neat printing. Jennifer, you looked beautiful tonight. J. The edge of the flap had that thin, dark line where glue meets breath. Morrison's breath left her, not in shock exactly, in recognition she had worked enough cold cases to know the difference between a souvenir and a statement. This was neither. It was a mistake. In 1999, they had dusted for prints because that was what you did. They had chased boys with J names because that was what the world offered. They had filed the envelope and moved on to interviews, maps, timelines, and grief. In 2024, the rules were different. Paper remembers everything. She sealed the yearbook back into its bag and set it aside. Then she lifted the envelope under the desk lamp. The light cut through, showing the line of adhesive where a tongue had pressed. Saliva dries. DNA does not forget. Maybe you talked to her, Morrison said softly to the room. Maybe you watched her dance. Maybe you stood in the parking lot and told yourself a story about the rest of your life. Her hand hovered over the case log. She wrote a new line in clean black ink. March 12, 2024, reopen. Submit envelope for DNA extraction. Priority. She closed the box halfway, then stopped. The sneakers, the necklace, the yearbook, the envelope, each object, a small door. She looked at the clock. 8:41 a.m. She looked at the date, March 12th. 3 days until Jennifer Martinez would have turned 41. Morrison pulled her phone and composed the email to the state lab subject line, 1999 envelope, sealed with saliva, non-destructive extraction requested. She attached the evidence log and photographs, added a note about case significance, and hit send. Her finger hovered again. She added one last line. We may have our suspect's DNA on this envelope. Request rush if possible. The message went. The silence returned. Above her, the building's heat kicked on with a familiar clang. The basement breathed out. And the story breathed in, Madison, Wisconsin. October 1999, the month when summer finally let go. There is a kind of quiet that settles over a Midwest city when industry fades, but memory refuses to wood smoke curls from chimneys in tight neighborhoods. River mills hum like distant conversation. Trees turn from flame to rust to bone. Bare branches rake at a gray sky that promises the first snow. Inside a small white house on the east side, a radio played low. Pop songs slid in and out of static. The kitchen clock ticked, steady as a heartbeat. Rosa Martinez sat by the front window, darning a sweater. Her hands were quick, practiced. Every few minutes she looked up from her needlework to check the street she had worked a double that day. Her eyes were tired, but the tired had a purpose. She was waiting for her daughter. She had been waiting since midnight. Just 16, Jennifer Martinez had a smile that made people lower their voices. She was the kind of student teachers trusted without thinking about it. She shelved books at the public library after school. She kept her brother's multiplication tables on a note card and taped it above the kitchen table. She saved up for her own drugstore mascara and teased her mother that she would be the first in their family to graduate college. She wore her hair in a ponytail most days. She wore a purple dress on October 23rd. That afternoon she got ready in Sarah Chen's bedroom. Two girls side by side in a mirror that reflected more hope than glass. Sarah lent her the dress. Jennifer chose her own black flats. They laughed at nothing. They posed for a photo on the stoop while Rosa shifted her stance to catch the light. It would be the last photo taken of Jennifer alive. Highland High's homecoming game started at 7, Highland versus East Madison, the annual rivalry that felt like a holiday. The student section shook the bleachers with noise. The air was crisp, clean, not yet the kind of cold that bites. Everything seemed possible in the way it only does when you are 16, and the world is small enough to hold Highland 1, 24-17. The band played. The field lights went out in halves. The crowd drifted toward the gym. At 9:30, the dance began. Streamers that looked cheaper under the gym's sodium lights, balloons tied to the basketball hoop post. A DJ with a playlist full of hits and slow songs, arranged like an argument between nerve and courage. Disposable cameras clicking, little bursts of flash that made the room feel like it was stuttering. Jennifer danced with Sarah. They took 2 silly photos and 1 serious one, because you always think you'll want to remember both. They drank fruit punch that someone said was spiked and someone else said wasn't. It tasted like sugar and dust and paper cups. Around 10:45, they ran into friends from English A Circle, formed and reformed and spun apart. For about 15 minutes, Jennifer drifted to the edge of the gym, then into the hallway, then back. When she found Sarah again, her smile had a seam in it. "You okay?" Sarah asked. "I'm fine," Jennifer said. "I think I'm going to head out soon. I'm tired." "Want me to come with you?" "No, you stay. My mom's shift ends at midnight. She'll pick me up." At 11:12 p.m., a security camera over the west exit captured a girl in a purple dress stepping into the October night, hugging her arms against the chill. The image was grainy, the kind that makes your eyes lean forward. The timestamp pulsed in the corner, the door swung closed, the image reset to empty. Jennifer Martinez walked into a parking lot full of chaperones, engines, fog, and good intentions. She was never seen alive again. At midnight, Rosa pulled into the west lot, headlights sweeping over patches of asphalt where leaves had stuck and dried. A few clusters of teenagers lingered by cars, not ready to give the night back. Her daughter was not among them. Rosa dialed Jennifer's cell. It rang, it rang, it rang. She circled the lot twice and parked under a streetlight. She walked into the gym where janitors were pulling trash bags and chaperones were gathering lost and found. "Have you seen my daughter, Jennifer Martinez? Purple dress?" A woman frowned and looked toward the doors and said, "Maybe she saw someone in purple getting into a car, but she wasn't sure. It was late. It was dark. She hadn't paid attention." People say these things when they want to help and cannot. At 12:35 a.m., Rosa called the police. "My daughter is missing," she said. "She was at the homecoming dance. She was supposed to meet me. She isn't here." The dispatcher asked the questions dispatchers must ask teenagers, sometimes go to after parties. Had she tried calling? "I've called 20 times, Rosa said. Her voice didn't rise. It went quiet in that way a voice goes quiet when the floor drops. By 1 a.m., a patrol car rolled through the west lot with lights dimmed. By 2, more officers. By 3, the local station ran a breaking banner with Jennifer's school photo. The anchor used the word missing twice and the word hope once. At dawn, the word missing felt like a mistake the night had made. 36 hours later, a jogger on the Yahara River trail stopped near the water's edge. Something purple had snagged in the brush, fabric where there should have been only reeds and water and the hiss of wind. Detective James Kowalski zipped his jacket higher when he stepped out of his unmarked 23 years on the job had not made this part easier. It had just taught him what to do with his hands. The body was young. The purple dress was familiar. The placement was deliberate, not thrown. The river lapped twice and then forgot again. The autopsy would say strangulation. The photos would say October. The scene would offer little. No obvious sexual assault, no usable prints, no weapon, no tire tracks worth believing care had been taken. Care always sounds like kindness until you're standing in a place like that. They found the yearbook beside her, heavy with damp, its pages swollen. The first pages held what every yearbook holds: have a great summer. You're awesome. Never change. English won't be the same without you. Between pages 47 and 48, an envelope, white, empty, blueprinting on the front. Jennifer, you looked beautiful tonight. J item number 43, logged, bagged, and filed. The interviews came quickly. The list was built in a column of first names: James, Jason, Jake, Justin. Boys whose names began with J and who had proximity to Jennifer's life. All 4 acknowledged signing the yearbook that night. All 4 denied slipping an envelope inside. Handwriting analysis shrugged. The note was printed. The pen could have been any pen on any school desk in any classroom that fall. The alibis varied in confidence. None split cleanly. All were enough to muddy the water. In 1999, DNA was a tool you used when you had blood, when you had certainty, when you had budget. An envelope wasn't certainty. It was a whisper. And there were louder things to chase. The case crowded the city's attention for weeks. Vigils, flyers, a phone number at the bottom in bold. The number of leads went up, and then down to silence. Winter came hard that year. The box joined the others. Back in the present, Morrison labeled the transport container, signed the chain of custody form, and walked the envelope upstairs herself. She watched the courier log the time. She watched the doors close. Only then did she exhale. She returned to the table and opened the yearbook again. She studied the photos as if they could speak. The gym, the hallway, the angle of a shoulder, the way a smile tightens when a decision is made. She closed the book and rested her palm on the cover. "Jennifer," she said, barely more than a breath, "if the answer is here, we'll hear it." Her phone buzzed a reply from the lab. Acknowledged, receipt scheduled, non-destructive extraction approved. Turnaround goal, 7 to 10 days. 7 to 10 days. She went back to the box and began to read the entire file from page 1. Not a skim, not a scan, every line, every date, every name. She took notes in a clean notebook, not because she didn't trust the old notes, but because new eyes need new paper. She wrote a single phrase at the top of her page and underlined it twice. What did we miss? On a separate line, she wrote another, what did time protect? She answered the first question with possibilities. She left the second blank. Time would answer it. The basement light flickered once and steadied upstairs. A printer started and stopped. Outside, a March wind shouldered the building and moved on. Morrison kept reading. Because this is how cold cases open, not with a revelation, with a box, with a breath, with a sentence that waited 25 years to be finished, and the knowledge that DNA is not magic, it is memory. It is paper learning to speak. In the fall of 1999, Madison sat between 2 eras. The grunge years were fading. The internet was still a rumor, more than a reality. People talked about Y2K in the same tone they used for urban legends. The Backstreet Boys were on every station. The Matrix had bent everyone's brain that summer. And at Highland High School, homecoming was still the kind of event that could decide whether your year was good or forgettable. For Jennifer Martinez, it was supposed to be simple: a dress borrowed from a friend, a ride from her mother, a night of noisy, harmless memory. Nothing more, nothing less. Saturday afternoon, October 23rd, began like most Saturdays in the Martinez apartment. Rosa had the early shift at the clinic. The smell of coffee and toasted bread lingered as she hurried out the door, kissing Jennifer's cheek. On the way, "Lock the door behind me," she said, the same phrase she had used every day for years. Jennifer nodded. "I will." Miguel sat at the kitchen table, pencil hovering over a half-finished math worksheet. Jennifer slid into the chair beside him. "You forgot to carry the one," she said, gently turning the paper so she could see. He groaned. "I hate fractions." "You hate showing your work," she corrected. "Fractions are innocent." He snorted and pushed his hair out of his eyes. "You sound like a teacher." "That is the idea," she said. "Come on, do 2 more, and you can watch TV." She stayed until the page was finished. Only then did she allow herself to think about the evening, about the dress, about the idea of walking into a gym full of people and not feeling invisible for once. Her own reflection had always been a negotiation. Some days she saw the things she liked, other days only what she lacked. On that day, when she stood in front of Sarah's full-length mirror a few hours later, something shifted. The purple dress sat right on her shoulders. The color made her skin look warm. Her hair, loose for once, skimmed her collarbone in soft waves. Sarah stood behind her, adjusting a strap like a stylist. "You look incredible," Sarah said. Jennifer rolled her eyes, but it was half-hearted. "Don't exaggerate." "I'm not? You really do? If anyone says otherwise, I will fight them in the parking lot." They laughed. The kind of laugh that comes easily at 16 when the future still feels like a very long hallway. Rosa arrived at Sarah's house at 6:30 to pick them up. She wore her second job clothes already, dark pants and a simple blouse that would be under a cleaning smock in an hour. She had asked her supervisor at the office building if she could start a little late. The woman had hesitated, then agreed, just this once. "Stand there," Rosa said, pointing to the small patch of lawn by the curb. The girls posed, arms around each other. The camera Rosa used was a cheap point-and-shoot, the kind that whined when it wound the film. She took 3 pictures, just in case. "One for me," she said. "One for you, Jenny. One to send to your grandmother." Jennifer rolled her eyes again, but she did not argue. She stepped forward and hugged her mother instead, careful not to wrinkle the dress. "Thank you for letting me go," she said quietly. Rosa pulled back. "You earned this. Call me when you are ready to leave." "I will." It is easy, with hindsight, to glare at that moment and demand more. More questions, more warnings. But in that instant, it was just another Saturday, just another teenage girl in a dress, heading to a gym decorated with crepe paper and hope. No one sees the cliff until they are already falling. The homecoming game felt like every other big game, which is to say, it felt like the whole world. Students packed the bleachers, faces painted, jackets unzipped, because no one wanted to admit it was cold yet. Coaches paced. Parents held styrofoam cups of hot chocolate and shouted things they would never say in any other place. Jennifer and Sarah squeezed into the student section, bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder. Every time Highland scored, the bleachers shook. She found herself screaming with everyone else, not because she cared about the football, but because it felt good to belong to a sound. Between plays they talked about classes, about an upcoming English test, about whether they should dance to slow songs or hide near the punch table. Jennifer pretended to be undecided, but part of her wondered what it would feel like if someone asked her. Halftime came and went. The band formed shapes on the field. The cheerleaders hit their marks. The scoreboard ticked forward in fits and starts until finally the game ended. Highland, 24. East Madison, 17. The crowd exhaled victory into the cold October air. The students spilled out, streaming toward the gym for the dance. The sky above the field had turned a deep, cloud-heavy navy, but the lights kept it at bay. Music from the DJ bled through the cinder-block walls before they ever crossed the threshold. Inside the gym, the temperature jumped. The place smelled like sweat, hairspray, and syrupy punch. Someone had wrapped streamers around the basketball hoops. Balloons sagged from their strings. A banner that read, "Homecoming 1999, Highland Strong," hung slightly crooked over the far wall. To a stranger, it might have looked cheap. To the students, it looked like the center of the universe. Jennifer took it in slowly. She clutched her yearbook against her side at first, unsure what to do with her hands. Then Sarah tugged her toward the middle of the floor. "Come on," she said. "We're not going to spend the whole night hiding by the bleachers." They danced not gracefully, not like anyone on TV. They moved the way teenagers move when the point is not to impress, but to discharge energy. Heads thrown back, arms loose, bodies off beat with the music, but completely in time with each other. In the gaps between songs, Jennifer opened her yearbook and held it out like a tray. "Sign?" she asked. People took it, wrote fast notes. "Don't forget chem next year. You're the nicest person in school. Good luck with college stuff. You'll do great." She meant to read them all later. She intended to sit on her bed at home, flip through, and commit each message to memory. That night she only skimmed. She wanted the signatures more than the words, proof that she was here, that she existed. It is one of the cruelties of what happened later that the yearbook did outlast her. Around 10:45, Sarah needed the bathroom. She gestured toward the hallway. "Come with me?" "You go," Jennifer said. "I'm going to find some water that doesn't taste like melted sugar." "You sure?" "I'm sure. I'll be right here." Sarah disappeared into the hallway. It was a simple moment, a break in the evening, something that happens 100 times in every gym on every school night. When Sarah returned 15 minutes later, Jennifer was not where she'd left her. For a few minutes, she thought nothing of it. She assumed Jennifer had joined another cluster of friends on the opposite side of the gym. She danced with a group from history class, scanning the room over their shoulders. Eventually, she spotted Jennifer standing near the doors that led to the lobby. Her yearbook was tucked under one arm now. Her other hand rubbed at her own elbow as if she were cold. Sarah pushed through the crowd. "Hey, there you are. You vanished." Jennifer startled slightly, then smiled. The smile did not quite reach her eyes. "Sorry," she said. "Just needed air." "You okay?" "Yeah." She paused. "Just tired, I think. I might go soon." Sarah frowned. "Already?" "My mom's shift ends at midnight. She said she'd pick me up. I'll go wait outside." "I'll come with you." Jennifer shook her head. "No, stay. You're having fun. I'd rather not let you freeze to death alone in the parking lot." "Sarah," Jennifer's tone was gentle but firm, "I'll be fine. I'll call you when I get home. We can talk about everyone's terrible dancing." That won a real laugh. "Deal," Sarah said. They hugged, a quick, familiar squeeze. They did not know it was a goodbye. At 11:12 p.m., Jennifer pressed the bar on the west exit and stepped into the night. The camera above the door recorded the movement as a change in pixels. To the machine, she was only a form shifting from one square to another. It had no understanding of weight. But the universe felt the gap she left. Outside, the parking lot had thinned but not emptied. A group of seniors leaned against a pickup near the far fence, passing a cigarette back and forth. The orange tip flared and died, flared and died. Someone laughed too loudly. Someone shushed them. Jennifer wrapped her arms around herself. The air had cooled since the game. The dress that had felt perfect indoors now felt flimsy. She walked toward the west side of the lot, near the row of visitor spots where her mother always parked. She checked her watch, still a while before midnight. She thought about going back inside, but the idea of pushing through the crowd again exhausted her. A car door shut to her left. Another opened. Somewhere behind her, a song bled faintly from the gym, muffled by cinder block. A car rolled slowly past, headlights cutting through the fog. The driver glanced her way, then moved on. Later, people would ask everyone who had been there that night what they had seen. Some remembered a girl in purple. Some remembered a boy in a dark jacket talking to someone near the lamppost. No one remembered anything clearly enough to make the difference. What we know is this. Jennifer waited. Someone approached. Words were exchanged. A choice was made. And the next time her name entered the system, it was under the word victim. Back at the apartment at 3 a.m., Rosa woke from an uneasy sleep on the couch. The TV had slipped into a late-night infomercial. The light flickered blue across the ceiling. For a moment she did not know what had woken her. Then she saw the time. She sat up fast. Her eyes went straight to the phone on the end table. No missed calls. She dialed Jennifer's number. It rang. It rang. It rang. The sound went somewhere and never came back. She tried again, then again. By the fourth call, her hands were shaking. At 12:35 a.m., she had believed she was being overprotective. At 3:05 a.m., she knew she was not. By 12:35 a.m., she had been in a crowded gym asking strangers if they had seen her child. By 3:10, she was telling a dispatcher that her daughter was missing. "This happens," the woman on the other end said, her voice calm by necessity. "Teens sometimes go to a friend's house or an after-party and forget to call." "Not my daughter," Rosa said. The words were quiet, but each one had the weight of a lifetime behind it. "She does not forget to call." The line went silent for a second. Then the dispatcher asked for details, description, last known clothing, the time she was supposed to be picked up. Rosa answered every question without pausing. She had spent years filling out forms for schools and clinics and services. This was another form. It was also the moment her life divided before that call. After that call, officers were dispatched. A patrol unit rolled through the high school parking lot, spotlights sweeping over asphalt and grass. They saw nothing except candy wrappers and discarded cups. By dawn, the missing persons bulletin had a face. The same face Rosa had photographed 12 hours earlier. The same purple dress. The same smile. You can freeze a smile on paper. You cannot freeze time. Across town, in the Yahara River corridor, the morning looked the way it always did, mist on the water. Joggers in layers, ducks skimming the surface. There was nothing in the sky to announce that something terrible waited near the reeds. The man who found her that morning was not looking for anyone. He was looking for distance and breath. He ran the same route every Sunday, his shoes marking the same bends, his body following a familiar script. The purple scrap pulled his eye first, a splash of color where there should have been none. He thought it was a coat someone had dropped. Then he saw the shape beneath it. He did what people do. He froze. Then he stepped forward. Then he stepped back. Then he reached for his phone with fingers that would not quite work. The call to dispatch was short. "There is a body by the river. Please hurry. The universe is indifferent to bodies." The river kept moving. The sky stayed gray. But somewhere in the Madison Police Department a radio crackled, and someone wrote down the words, "Yahara River Trail." And the story of Jennifer Martinez began to bend toward the table in the basement, toward the envelope, toward the day when someone would finally hear what the paper had kept. The call came in at 7:12 a.m. A jogger, Yahara River Trail, possible body, female, young. Detective James Kowalski was drinking his second cup of burnt station coffee when the dispatcher relayed the details. He set the cup down, already reaching for his coat. He had seen death before, too much of it. But a teenager on homecoming weekend had a particular weight, the kind that settles in the chest and stays there. Kowalski reached the trail at 7:45 a.m. The morning was still cold enough for his breath to show. Police tape fluttered between two trees, catching the early wind. A handful of uniforms moved carefully through the brush. No one spoke above a murmur. The jogger stood off to the side with a blanket around his shoulders, hands fixed in fists. He didn't seem to know what to do with. Every so often he looked at the ground and then quickly away. The body lay just a few feet from the riverbank, purple fabric caught on reeds, one arm resting awkwardly across her torso, hair partially covering her face. Kowalski crouched, not close enough to disturb anything, but close enough to understand what had been taken. 16, he murmured. 17 at most. The medical examiner arrived moments later, Dr. Cole took in the scene with the calm of someone who had learned long ago how to divide her brain in two, compassion on one side, precision on the other. She knelt. Female, teenaged, strangulation signs visible, body positioned intentionally, not thrown. She looked up at Kowalski and lowered her voice. "James, this is your missing girl, isn't it?" He nodded once. There was no need for confirmation. He had studied the missing person bulletin enough times already. The purple dress, the dark hair, the shape of her face. You do not forget details when the stakes are this steep. Crime scene techs cordoned off the area. Cameras snapped in slow succession. Evidence markers sprouted in the brush like small yellow flags of regret. The yearbook was found 8 feet away, half hidden under damp leaves. The envelope was tucked securely inside. Kowalski picked up the bagged yearbook with gloved hands. The pages were heavy with moisture, but intact. He flipped to the envelope and paused only a second before sealing it in a separate evidence pouch. Something in him tightened, not fear, recognition. He would later say that he had a feeling about that envelope, but feelings do not stand up in court. Facts do, and that morning had very few of them. The search began immediately. Officers canvassed the trail, the nearby parking lot, the riverbank. They found no weapon, no tire tracks, no footprints clear enough to trust. The killer had been careful, or the river had erased what mattered. By 9:30 a.m., word reached Highland High School. The principal shut the library early. Students cried in hallways. Teachers whispered in clusters. They hoped students could not overhear. By noon, the city was watching the news. By 3, the grieving had already begun. Back at the station, in interview room B, Jennifer's mother sat with her hands clasped tightly together. She had not cried since being told. She held her grief the same way she held everything, quietly, privately, with a strength that made others feel small. Kowalski sat across from her. "I'm sorry," he said. The words felt thin, insufficient, but they were all he had. Rosa nodded. "I want to know what happened to my daughter. Nothing else matters." He handed her a tissue. She didn't use it. Instead, she looked directly at him, her eyes steady and sharp. "You find who did this," she said. "Promise me." "I will do everything I can." "I need more than that," she said softly. "I need you to mean it." And he did. More than she could know, cold cases begin in grief, but they grow in obligation. Kowalski carried both. The first 48 hours of an investigation shape everything that comes afterward. Kowalski knew that rhythm. He built the timeline. 11:12 p.m. Jennifer exits the west doors, 11:15 to 11:30, uncertain. No witnesses confirmed direct contact, 11:30 to 12. Possible sighting of a purple dress entering a car, unverified. 12. Rosa arrives. 12:35. Rosa calls police. 3. Missing person alert issued 7:12. Body discovered. A gap of 17 minutes. A gap that would haunt the case for 25 years. By noon, the list of possible suspects was already growing. They started with the boys whose names began with J, because the human brain loves symmetry. James Hartley, senior, football team, English class. Jason Wu, junior, student council. Jake Morrison, teacher's assistant in the library. Justin Chen, cousin of Sarah. All had been at the dance, all denied writing a note separate from the yearbook signatures. All were questioned more than once. James had left with his girlfriend at 10:30. Justin had dropped Sarah home at 10:45. Jake had been a chaperone until 11:30. Jason left with a group of friends at 11. Each story had shape. Each story had holes. Each story fit if you tilted your head the right way. That was the problem. Handwriting analysis offered nothing. The note was printed. The envelope's paper absorbed the ink in a way that blurred any unique characteristics. Fingerprints led nowhere. Partial smudges, none viable. None matched the 4 boys. None matched Jennifer. None matched her family. The yearbook held signatures from dozens of people. The gym had held hundreds. The dance had been chaos wrapped in music. It was the kind of environment that allowed a killer to blend into the air itself. But Kowalski was not a man easily defeated by noise. He interviewed. He re-interviewed. He built timelines. He cross-checked alibis. He walked the path from the gym to the parking lot 10 times, imagining the October wind, the noise, the darkness, the moment where a life swerves out of its lane. He held the envelope more than once. He studied it. He placed it on the table and stared at it as if waiting for it to speak. It didn't. Not yet. As days became weeks, the story followed its familiar arc. The news crews stayed as long as the vigils did. The posters remained on posts and windows until the edges curled. Rosa Martinez walked the river trail every Sunday, refusing to let the world move forward without her daughter. But even the most determined grief cannot outrun time forever. Winter came. Then spring. The case remained open. But open is not the same as alive. Interviews slowed, leads dissolved. Tips that once felt promising collapsed under scrutiny. The envelope was filed into box number 99-0428, taped, logged, forgotten by everyone except the mother who asked about it every month. Kowalski worked the case until 2015, long after everyone else stopped talking about it. He retired without closure, without knowing that he had been inches away from the truth the entire time. The envelope had held the answer, but 1999 was not equipped to hear it. By the time March 2024 arrived, the case was a whisper in old departmental archives, a name in a binder, a question folded into a box, until a detective with tired eyes and steady hands cut the tape and reopened the door, until an envelope sealed by a 17-year-old boy 25 years earlier released a truth it had been holding in its paper fibers and glue, and the story that had gone silent began to speak again. Detective Lisa Morrison believed two things deeply, that time buried nothing and that paper never forgot. When she joined the Madison Cold Case Unit in January 2024, she carried both beliefs like tools. Not sharpened, not polished, just worn and true. The unit itself occupied a modest corner of the department. No glass walls, no fast-talking analysts with glowing screens. Just two detectives, one part-time analyst, a malfunctioning coffee maker, and decades' worth of grief stacked in fireproof cabinets. Cold cases are not glamorous. They do not begin with sirens, they begin with absence. With a mother who no longer calls because she has grown tired of hearing the same polite apologies. With files thick from years of handling and thin from years of loss. Jennifer Martinez was number 7 on Morrison's initial list. She read the file 3 times over the course of 2 weeks. She made notes. She mapped timelines. She wrote questions that stretched across 3 pages, but one thing kept catching her eye. The envelope, it was documented. It was photographed. It was stored. But it had never been tested for DNA. To Morrison, that was not a detail. That was the missing hinge of a door that had never been opened. On March 18, 2024, the Wisconsin State Crime Laboratory received the envelope. Senior forensic scientist Dr. Michelle Park signed for it personally. She had worked at the lab for 19 years and had developed a habit of speaking to old evidence as if it were a tired witness. She held the envelope under a forensic lamp and murmured, "Let's see what you've been keeping." Paper from 1999 is delicate, glue from 1999 is unpredictable, but saliva is stubborn. It holds fragments of whoever left it, fragments that science in 1999 could not use, fragments that science in 2024 welcomed like gold. Dr. Park prepared a small tray. She worked in silence except for the gentle hum of the HEPA filter above her. Using magnification and microforceps, she cut a narrow slice, 2 millimeters wide, along the sealed flap. Under a microscope, the adhesive glowed faintly, not visually, but in presence. This was where skin cells clung. This was where the tongue had pressed. This was where a killer had revealed himself without meaning to. Extraction began. Liquids, enzymes, temperatures carefully controlled. A process that had taken weeks in 1999 took hours now. The sample incubated overnight. On March 27th, amplification began. On March 29th at 9:18 a.m., Dr. Park stood in front of her monitor watching a DNA profile form like a ghost taking shape, male, complete, clear, undamaged. She called Morrison immediately. "We have a full profile," Park said. Morrison's pen froze over her notebook. "Tell me you're serious." "As serious as I've ever been. Your suspect's DNA is on this envelope." "CODIS?" Morrison asked. "Any hits?" Park took a breath. "No match in CODIS. Whoever this is, he never went through the system." Morrison leaned back in her chair. "So he's clean, or careful." "Or both," Park said. "But the DNA's good. You can do genealogy." "Then that's what we'll do." "Lisa," Park added, softer now, "this is a gift. Don't waste it." She didn't intend a forensic genetic genealogy as patient work, slow work that requires persistence but rewards obsession. Morrison had both. She contracted with Parabon Nanolabs. She uploaded the DNA profile to GED Match, the same database that had cracked dozens of cold cases since 2018. Within 24 hours, partial matches appeared. Not direct hits, no brothers, no parents, but distant relatives, third cousins, fourth cousins. Genetic breadcrumbs scattered across the Midwest. Lead genealogist Rebecca Chen took the file. She built family trees across 3 monitors in her small office, tracing back through immigration records, census reports, birth certificates, obituaries, and church registries. It took 12-hour days. It took 2 months. It took patience she described as borderline masochistic. By early June, Rebecca had narrowed the web to a cluster of families descending from a couple who had emigrated from Poland to Milwaukee in 1902. From that original couple spread dozens of descendants. Only a few fit the criteria: male, alive in 1999, living near Madison, between 14 and 40 at the time, 17 names. Rebecca sent the list to Morrison. Morrison had the job of cutting it down. She eliminated anyone with verified prison records in 1999, anyone confirmed to have lived out of state, anyone who had died before Jennifer was killed, anyone too young. 3 names remained, 3 men who could have licked the envelope, 3 men who could have been with Jennifer in the parking lot. One name stopped her breath. Jason Wu, Jr., student council, same grade, same circles. One of the original J suspects, interviewed in 1999, cleared, nothing suspicious on record, no history of violence, no arrests, nothing to suggest danger, except proximity, opportunity, and now DNA. Morrison opened his old statement and read it again. Left dance at 11 p.m., dropped off friends at 11:20, home by 11:45. Parents confirm. The timeline fit. Barely, but it fit. And the yearbook confirmed that Jason and Jennifer had spoken that night. He had been 17 then. He was 42 now, a senior marketing executive, a husband, a father, a board member at a youth arts program, a man who had built a life on top of something rotten. But genealogy alone could not convict him. She needed direct DNA. She needed something Jason Wu would throw away, touched by his hands or lips, left on public property. She needed a coffee cup, a napkin, a straw. Something that belonged to him without belonging to him. Legal, clean, undeniable. Surveillance began quietly. 2 weeks of tailing his morning routine. Every day at 6:45 a.m., Jason left his quiet suburban home. Every day he drove to the same Starbucks on Mineral Point Road. Every day he ordered a grande iced coffee, no cream, no sugar. Every day he sat at the same outdoor table for 15 minutes before driving to work. Every day he carried the cup with him. Every day he threw it away inside his office building, private property, off limits. By day 12, Morrison felt the frustration clawing at her ribs. By day 13, she wondered if he knew they were watching. By day 14, fate intervened. Jason answered a phone call mid-coffee. He paced. He gestured. He seemed upset. And when he left fast. He forgot the cup. An undercover officer picked it up with gloved hands, photographed it, bagged it, labeled it. The chain of custody was perfect. The cup arrived at the state lab within an hour. Dr. Park ran the test herself. On Monday, July 1st, she called Morrison. Her voice held a stillness that only comes before truth. "Lisa," she said, "it's a full match." Morrison closed her eyes. How full? 13 core loci 1 in 8.7 trillion probability. "That's him," Morrison whispered. "That's him," Park said. The case that had waited 25 years had finally named its killer. Dawn had barely touched the edges of Madison when Detective Lisa Morrison stepped out of her unmarked car on July 10, 2024. The morning was silent except for a few early birds and the low hum of the cruiser engines parked discreetly along the quiet street. The Wu residence sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, a 2-story house with soft gray siding and a porch light still on. It looked peaceful, respectable. A picture of stability in a neighborhood where children rode bikes in tight circles and parents waved from driveways. But Morrison had seen houses like this before, homes with polished floors and untarnished lawns that hid a truth pressed deep beneath decades of routine homes that belonged to men who smiled in photos but carried secrets in dark places. She checked her watch. 6:29 a.m. 1 minute. Behind her, 2 unmarked vehicles idled silently. 6 officers stood waiting, uniforms beneath jackets, movements rehearsed. They weren't raid specialists because this wasn't a raid. This was removal, surgical, quiet, controlled. Her plan was simple: get to Jason before he left for work, before his children came downstairs. Before the day had time to assemble its normal shape, she nodded to the team. Positions. At 6:30 a.m. sharp, Morrison walked up the driveway, her boots whispering against the concrete. She pressed the doorbell once. The sound echoed inside the house, a muted chime. Seconds later, footsteps. Then the turn of a deadbolt. The door opened. Jason Wu stood there in a neatly pressed dress shirt and dark slacks, hair slightly damp from a shower. A ceramic mug of coffee steamed in his right hand. He looked exactly like the man described in his performance evaluations: professional, punctual, poised. He blinked at the sight of Morrison and the officers behind her. "Jason Wu," Morrison asked. "Yes?" He paused. "Can I help you?" The confusion on his face looked genuine or practiced. With men like him, it was often the same thing. Morrison showed her badge. "I'm Detective Lisa Morrison with the Madison Police Department." He opened his mouth as if to respond, but she spoke first. "I need you to step outside, please." Jason glanced over his shoulder. His wife, Emma, appeared halfway down the stairs wearing a robe, her hair in a loose braid, her voice carried down the hallway. "Jason, who is it?" "1 second," he called back over his shoulder. Then, turning to Morrison, "Detective, is something wrong? Is my family—" "Your family is fine," Morrison said. "Step outside, please. Now." There was a moment, nothing more than a flicker, a breath, when something crossed Jason's expression, not surprise recognition. A tiny spark of understanding, quickly smothered. He stepped onto the porch, and the world he had built for 25 years began to unspool. "Jason Wu," Morrison said, her voice steady and clear. "You are under arrest for the murder of Jennifer Martinez." Jason froze completely. The color drained from his face as if someone had opened a valve. Behind him, Emma let out a sharp gasp. "No," she whispered. "No, there's no way." Her voice rose. Jason, tell them." Jason didn't answer. He didn't even turn. He stood still as an object, his coffee mug trembling in his hand, steam pouring into the cold morning air. "Please place your hands behind your back," an officer instructed. Jason obeyed. The mug slipped from his fingers and shattered on the porch, coffee spreading across the wood. Like a bruise, Emma's voice cracked open. "This is a mistake. He didn't do anything. Jason, say something." But Jason stared downward, face blank, eyes empty, shoulders sagging as though finally giving in to gravity he had avoided for decades. The cuffs clicked around his wrists. The sound was soft, final. The children woke from the noise, their confused faces appearing at the upstairs landing. Emma rushed to them, shielding them from the sight, her body shaking. "Mom?" the older child asked. "What's happening?" Emma could not answer. Morrison felt the moment's heaviness. She didn't enjoy this part. Arresting a killer rarely felt like victory. It felt like excavation, digging up something foul that had been buried too long. As Jason was walked to the waiting car, he looked up at Morrison for the first time. His voice was almost calm. "I always wondered," he said quietly, "if someone would ever figure it out." She held his gaze. "You left evidence behind, Jason. Evidence that never stopped waiting." He swallowed hard, standing half in the sun, half in shadow. "I never meant for it to happen," he whispered. "That doesn't make it any less true," she said. He was placed in the back seat, the door shut. The engine hummed to life. Emma stepped forward, tears streaking her face. "This can't be real," she said. "He's a good man, a good father." Morrison looked at her with a softness she rarely allowed. "He may have been those things," she said, "but he was also a 17-year-old boy who made a terrible choice, and Jennifer Martinez has waited 25 years for someone to tell the truth." Emma broke into a sob. The car pulled away. Back at the department, Jason sat in interview room C, a room with no windows, no clock, no distractions. Only a table, 2 chairs, and a recorder. He kept his eyes on his cuffed hands. His lawyer arrived 30 minutes later, sat beside him, and whispered instructions. "Don't speak. Don't answer anything. Don't make their job easier." Morrison entered with a stack of evidence bags and a folder thick with documents. She sat across from Jason. The room hummed with silence. "Jason," she said gently, "I'm not here to break you. I'm here to ask you for the truth." His lawyer began to object, but Morrison continued. "She was 16. She had a family. She had dreams she didn't get to live. You know that." Jason's jaw tightened. His hands curled slowly into fists. "You were 17, Morrison said. "You didn't plan to be a killer, but you became one. That's the part you've been running from." She slid an evidence bag across the table. Inside was the envelope. The room seemed to tighten. "You licked this," she said. "You sealed it. You put it in Jennifer's yearbook. Your DNA is on it. Your DNA matches the coffee cup you left outside Starbucks." His lawyer cut in sharply. "My client has no comment." Jason breathed out slowly, a long, shuddering release. Morrison leaned forward. "Look at her," she said. She pushed the yearbook photo toward him. Jennifer and Sarah homecoming night. Alive. Jason looked. His face twisted, not in anger, but in something far more dangerous. Regret. "I never meant to hurt her," he said finally. His lawyer's head snapped toward him. "Jason, no. Stop talking." Jason didn't stop. "I never meant to hurt anyone." The dam broke, and the confession began. For the next hour, Jason spoke in sentences barely above a whisper. He told Morrison everything, how he'd liked Jennifer for months, how he thought she liked him too, how he misread her smile, her kindness, her politeness, how, when she gently told him she didn't feel the same, something broke inside him, something he had never fixed. He described the argument, the moment his hands closed around her throat, the blind panic afterward, the decision to place her body near the river, not dump it, the fear that consumed him for months, the shame that softened with time, the lie he became, the person he built over the lie. "I thought it would stay buried," he said. "I thought if I lived a good life, it would cancel out the bad thing I did." Morrison stood slowly. "It doesn't cancel," she said. "It waits." Jason Wu was charged with second-degree murder. He pled guilty on September 9, 2024. He was sentenced to 35 years without the possibility of parole. The courtroom was full the day he was sentenced. Rosa Martinez sat in the front row, hands folded, a tissue in her lap. She listened to Jason's apology without blinking. When it ended, she whispered 3 words, "I forgive nothing." Jason bowed his head. In the hallway, reporters waited. Rosa stepped out slowly, Miguel beside her. "Jennifer was my light," she said. "She was kind. She was gentle. She deserved to grow up. Today she finally has justice. I have waited 25 years. I can stop wondering now." Morrison watched from a distance, leaning against the wall. A quiet pride settled into her shoulders. Cold cases do not heal wounds, but they close them. Sometimes that is all the world can offer. Sometimes it is enough. Justice does not arrive with fireworks. It arrives quietly, in a courtroom, in a signature, in the tightening of handcuffs around a man who once walked through the world unseen. But what comes after, that is where the story lives, that is where the echoes remain. For the Martinez family, July 2024 marked the end of one kind of pain and the beginning of another. For 25 years they had lived in a house built on unanswered questions, a house where silence filled the spaces between meals, where the word maybe was spoken more often than any prayer. The door to the past had finally opened. But closure is not a clean line. It is a slow, uneven exhale. Rosa Martinez stood on the courthouse steps the day Jason Wu was sentenced. Reporters leaned forward with microphones, but Rosa spoke not for them. She spoke for herself. "Jennifer was my daughter," she said. "She was gentle, she was responsible, she was my pride. He stole her life, and he stole ours too. But today at least the wondering is over, and now I can rest a little." Her voice shook, but it never broke. Miguel stood beside her. He was 40 now, older than Jennifer would ever be. He carried her picture in his jacket pocket. He had carried it everywhere since the day she disappeared. "People forget," he said quietly, "but I never did. She was my big sister. She taught me how to ride a bike. She helped me with math. And now finally someone said her name in a courtroom and gave her the justice she deserved." Behind them, the courthouse door closed slowly, as if reluctant to shut out the story that had lived within its walls for a quarter century. 1 month after sentencing, Highland High School held a small ceremony in the courtyard garden behind the main building. There was a narrow brick path, a few benches, and a ring of trees that kept the courtyard shaded even in summer. Students sometimes ate lunch there. Teachers sometimes graded papers there. It had never been a place associated with grief. But on that morning, grief took a seat and stayed a while. A new bench had been installed, simple wood slats, clean lines, a plaque set into the center. The inscription read, "Jennifer Martinez, 1983-1999. Beloved daughter, sister, friend. Her kindness touched many lives. Her memory inspires us all." The principal spoke first, then a retired English teacher who remembered Jennifer as a quiet student who always volunteered to help classmates with essays. Then Sarah Chen, her best friend, the girl who had been with her the night she dressed up in purple and laughed in front of the mirror. "She was supposed to come home with me that night," Sarah said, standing at the podium with a folded piece of paper in her shaking hands. "We were supposed to complain about the music and joke about who had the worst dance moves, but instead—" I woke up to her face on the news. She paused, pressing her lips together. "I've lived with guilt for 25 years. But Detective Morrison told me the only person responsible is the person who did it." I'm trying to believe that. She looked at the bench. "I hope this reminds people that Jennifer mattered, that she still matters." Students clapped quietly. Rosa cried, her hands covering her mouth. Miguel placed a single purple flower on the bench. Morrison stood at the back, watching. She did not speak. She did not need to. Her work was done in labs and interviews, in paperwork and patience. This was the family's moment. She let them have it. Back at the cold case unit, Morrison framed Jennifer's homecoming photo and placed it on her desk, not as a trophy, not as a reminder of her own success, but as a promise that cold cases are not frozen, they are paused, waiting, listening, held open by the persistence of families and detectives who refused to forget. When reporters later asked her how she solved a 25-year-old murder, she gave the same answer every time. "We looked at old evidence with new eyes. The answers were always there. They were just waiting for science to catch up." She never added what she really believed, that evidence is only half the battle. The other half is the human beings who refuse to walk away. The case of Jennifer Martinez sent ripples through Madison. Community members began asking about other cold cases. Families who had stopped calling started calling again. The department received renewed funding for forensic genealogy. And for the first time in years, the cold case unit had hope where hope had died. News outlets covered the story intensely. Some called it a landmark case. Others called it a miracle. But Morrison disliked both terms. "There are no miracles in this job," she said once in an interview. "There is only work and time, and sometimes, if you're lucky, the truth." For Rosa Martinez, life slowly reshaped itself, not back to what it was. Grief does not undo itself, but into something bearable. She visited Jennifer's memorial bench every Sunday, sat with her hands folded, talked softly to a daughter who could no longer answer. Miguel joined her sometimes. He brought coffee. He told Jennifer about his job, about his kids, about small things she would have loved. On quiet mornings, Rosa traced her fingers over her daughter's name on the plaque. "You're remembered," she whispered. "You're home." Cold cases all share one truth. They are stories interrupted, stories caught between a beginning and an ending that comes too late. Jennifer's story had waited 25 years for its ending. Her evidence had sat in a box for decades. Her mother had waited every day for a phone call that never came. Her brother had grown older than she ever would. But in the end, the truth did not disappear. It simply waited for the right moment to be seen. Evidence does not die. Time does not erase. Paper remembers. And in 2024, because of a fragile envelope and a detective who refused to ignore it, Jennifer Martinez was no longer a question. She was an answer. Justice, late but real.